Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for being here for the third of our series on excellence and equity in the Worcester Public Schools. Today, we'll be talking about the Worcester Public Schools' new literacy curriculum, which we are all very, very excited about. I'd like to welcome members of the Worcester Public Schools staff, Amanda Taylor. Amanda, can you wave to our folks? Um, and thank you all once again for being here. Okay, next slide then, Emily. Okay, this event is being hosted by the Worcester Education Equity Roundtable. The Roundtable is a gathering of members of the education ecosystem here in Worcester who gather monthly and as needed to talk about critical issues related to the education of our children. So, okay. Tonight's event is being recorded. We also have Spanish translation available, and the instructions for that are in the chat. We will be talking this evening about the results of a survey that Worcester Education Collaborative engaged with the Hanover Research Group, and Emily Dodge will be presenting those results. Speaking about the Amplify curriculum, which is the new Worcester Public Schools curriculum, Amplify CKLA, which stands for Core Knowledge Language Arts, will be Amanda Taylor, as I mentioned, who is for the district, the elementary ELA curriculum specialist. And she'll be joined by Colleen Murray, an ELA instructional coach with the Worcester Public Schools, and Kate Aselton, who is also an instructional coach. After their presentation, we will have a panel discussion. And in addition to questions that we've prepared, we are eager to hear questions from the audience. We were also hoping that Caleb Encarnacion Rivera would be joining us this evening. Unfortunately, Caleb's got laryngitis. So let's everyone remind Caleb to hydrate. And we will hear from him at a future date. Okay.
Thanks, Jen. So I will kick us off with a brief presentation outlining some results of a survey that we had conducted with parents and caregivers of Worcester Public School students around literacy and how they think their kids are performing and what kind of supports and resources they think are needed. So to set the stage here for this conversation, Worcester Education Collaborative engaged Hanover Research, an education research and consulting company, to help us collect information kind of widely from parents across Worcester about their child's literacy. So this was data collected October to just January of this year using an online platform called Qualtrics. The survey was modeled after one from an education advocacy organization called the Massachusetts Education Equity Partnership, and modeled to provide kind of a local view on a statewide literacy survey that they developed. We had nearly 500 parents and caregivers respond to the survey. You can see here some demographic information. About 60% of the parents have one child in the Worcester Public Schools. Another 40 have two or more children. For the purposes of the survey, we asked everybody to just focus on one child and answer the set of questions with one child in mind. So 68% of parents were thinking about their child who is in elementary school, 14% middle school, and 18% high school students. And we tried to randomize which, if they had multiple children, which child they were answering the survey for by having them answer the survey questions for the child whose birthday came earlier in the calendar year, to avoid getting all of the younger students or all of the older students' responses. The remaining statistics that you see are for the child. So just to keep that in mind, you can see in terms of race ethnicity, parents reported 55% of children were white, 29% Hispanic or Latino, Latinx, 17% Black or African American, and 6% Asian. 43% of their children identified as female and 52% male. Around a quarter had a child with an IEP, individualized education plan, and 19% had a child who is an English learner. And our research questions were, what are parents' perceptions of children's literacy outcomes and their interests in reading in particular? And how do parents perceive their access to various literacy resources? So I'm going to zoom us through some results here. We first asked about their child being on grade level. About 2/3 said they believe their child is on grade level. Another 23% said no, and 11% weren't sure. For the 23% of respondents who said no, we asked them additional questions. So of those parents, 2/3 or about 67% noticed that they were below grade level in reading prior to this year, suggesting it was not new for them. And then we also asked, how do you understand how your child is progressing in reading and writing? You can see here, vast majority use grades and report cards or conversations with their children. Information from their teacher is also pretty common, as well as parent-teacher conferences, followed by around a quarter of parents who are using assessment data from the ELA MCAS state standardized test, or other literacy diagnostic assessments, both of which were topics of our prior community forums on literacy and achievement. We asked about concern with reading progress. Here you'll see, combining these two darker green bars, about 42% of parents are somewhat or very concerned about their child's progress. Though remember, only around a quarter, 23%, felt that their child was behind. Of those parents, we asked them additional questions, what exactly, which of the following are you concerned about? Here we saw around half cited specific reading challenges like spelling or comprehension. And then between 30 and 40% noted the impact on their child's future, specifically being behind grade level or a disinterest in reading. Hanover noted that the interest in reading varied by school level. So this was a big concern of parents of high school students. 63% cited it there, whereas it was only a concern among 28% of elementary and 22% of parents of middle school. of parents who had elementary or middle school students. In terms of feedback or support, we were curious to know kind of what parents were hearing from schools and supports that were provided. So here, about 2/3 of parents reported getting feedback about their child's reading progress within the last year. In terms of how helpful this was, 60%, again, combining those darker green bars, indicated the feedback was very or extremely helpful, and another 34% noted it was somewhat helpful. We asked another question about have teachers or any other school staff discuss ways that you could support your child's reading at home. Here, 58% of parents reported that they had. And we again asked about which specific resources does your child's school provide. Here we actually found that being unsure was the most common answer at 38%. Again, folks could select all that apply, which is why these will add to more than 100. But that resources to be able to bring back home to practice, small group instruction, and assessment were some other common supports that they were accessing. Of particular relevance for tonight's conversation, we asked a question about have you received any information about the district's new reading curriculum that we'll hear about in just a couple of minutes here. Here, 44% of parents indicated that they had. Another 40% said that they know that they had not. And then there was a significant portion, 16% of parents who were not sure. We were curious about accessibility to books in particular, and where families were accessing those. Here we found having books at home, 94% was the most common, followed pretty closely by the community library, which will definitely come up as a recurring theme. This was at 83%. School libraries were 66%, and then classroom libraries were just a bit under that at 58%. Specifically within the school library, we were wondering when children were going to the library. So here we see about 60% are accessing that during the school day. In terms of the reading material, we see that children are accessing age-appropriate reading material primarily through their families, though followed pretty closely by the Worcester Public Library at 62%, then the school or classroom library, teachers, or other ways. And by and large, in terms of reading material, books are the most popular. And then comic books, online material, and graphic novels are all around 35 to 40%. We wanted to ask too about kids' interest in reading. So in terms of responses here, we see that about 66% of parents reported that their children somewhat like reading or likes a great deal. This overall average masks differences once again by age, where we see decreasing affinity over time, with 70% of elementary school students liking reading down to about 50% of high school students. And finally, curious about how much kids were reading outside of school. Around 42% here are parents are reporting that their kids read 20 minutes or more outside of school. So Hanover left us with a few actionable recommendations that I will not fully read to you, but we'll highlight here that addressing the concern about children's reading progress, where a third are concerned, is a suggested action. The awareness about the new reading curriculum here at 44%, they noted could be enhanced through events such as the one we are organizing tonight to get the word out and share information about this new curricula and provide a platform to answer questions. And then they also highlighted the importance of fostering a culture of reading, particularly among older high school students, since we're seeing that drop in interest in reading over time. So I will pause there. If anyone has immediate questions, happy to answer those. And we will also make sure to send out all the slides for folks who want to digest this information as well.
And we'll also have time at the, after the presentations, if people need some time to think and put various presentations together to craft questions. But Amy, you have a question or a comment about a skew in the demographics. Emily, could you speak to that?
Amy, could you say more there?
Yeah, I was noticing that the group that responded the most was white, and the lowest, the smallest percentage was parents of English learners, which is going to make some sense. So I'm wondering if there are any plans for reaching out to the specific communities that didn't respond as much as the white native speakers community, native English speaking community.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. The survey was available in English and Spanish. But certainly we did not have the full range of languages that are spoken across the district. And we did get a recommendation from Hanover to, they kind of suggested as a next step to engage in focus group, targeted follow-up, just in the way that you're describing. The survey can tell one story, but they suggested getting more quantitative and qualitative information to represent the full kind of range of demographics of Worcester Public School parents and students.
Thank you. And Pat, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had a similar question to Amy's, and also I think I saw this in the recommendations. Is there any plan for future actually asking? I'm really concerned about the loss of interest in reading over time. I think that's really huge, not just in Worcester. And I'm wondering, is there any plan to actually talk to middle and high school students directly and get information about their interests in reading? Is there any plan for that follow-up?
There is not at this point. Our formal contract with Hanover Research is concluded, but it is something that, yes, we are very concerned about that. And as you mentioned, Pat, it is a broad and long-standing concern. If you look at the number of people in the United States who don't read a book after they've graduated from high school or don't read a book after they've graduated from college. The number is astounding. So that's a long-term research question. And Naj, you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you so much. So I'm a parent of two Worcester Public School students right now. They're both in, well, one's in third grade and one's in first. I have a couple of questions. First being, when was the survey sent? Because I do my very best to be very involved, and I don't know if this was like a generalized survey that was sent to a select group or not. And then the second part to my question is, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think the presentation is over. But one thing that my first graders class did in the beginning of the school year was they were provided a reading log. And I think outside of the fact that my husband and I do request or require that our kids read before bed, that I think encouraged my first grader a lot more. And so I'm just curious as to if whatever program is being put in place, if there are going to be more details shared about that. But thank you.
Emily, do you want to speak to how the survey was distributed?
Sure. Yeah, Nash, thanks for your question. So, this was posted, I believe, in Parent Square, from October. There were a couple of postings about it beginning in October. And then we also used community partnerships and, the roundtable, being one of them to get the word out. But, can hear you that we absolutely did not reach everyone here, so that's helpful feedback. And your second question is great to post to our panelists in just a couple of minutes. So thank you. I think that will be good to get some insight on the way that the district is approaching that and how they're encouraging reading.
Great. Other questions before we move on? Yeah. Okay, I am going to pass things then to Amanda Taylor, who is going to walk us through the CKLA curriculum and what the district is doing in terms of reading and the broader skills associated with literacy.
Right, thank you, Jennifer. I'll just take a moment here to pull up our slides for today. Oh, and I'm getting a message that multiple participants cannot currently share. I don't know if that's a setting that needs to be changed.
Okay, we will work on that for you, Amanda.
Oh, it may be working now. I'm just tried again. Let's see. Everyone can cross their fingers for me here and we'll see. Are you able to?
Got it, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. Thanks for your patience for a moment, everyone. We did practice beforehand, but I think Zoom still tends to get me sometimes, even with that practice in place. All right, well, thank you so much for having us. As Jennifer stated, I'm Amanda Taylor. I am the Elementary ELA Curriculum Specialist here in Worcester, and I'm so happy to be joined today by two of my colleagues who are also very passionate about literacy in the Worcester Public Schools, Colleen Murray and Kate Aselton. They are our integrated coaches here in Worcester. And we're excited to talk to you about one of our favorite topics, which is literacy in Worcester, and particularly our new literacy curriculum that we started last year. So as educators, we always like to start our lessons with our objectives. So we're going to share that with you as well. So really our goals for today are really to allow you an opportunity to hear more about the factors we considered in our decision to adopt high quality instructional materials. And you might hear that referred to as HQIM for short, to allow you to learn about the difference between the science of reading and structured literacy as compared to balanced literacy. And also to teach you a bit about the new program we're using, which is called Amplify Core Knowledge Language Arts, or CKLA, in grades K through 5, and Amplify ELA, which is our 6th grade or our middle school component. So to begin, we just want to set the stage for you with a little bit of background that includes a brief overview of the literacy crisis that has very rightfully so gained national attention over the past few years. So I know for some of you, this is a bit of a review, as I know this has been a really important part of WEC's work for quite some time now, but we felt it was such an important part of Worcester's story and really why we are where we are now and the changes we've made that it felt remiss not to include a little bit about it. So we're going to hop right into that first here. So again, many of you are probably already aware of the magnitude of this issue through prior engagement with WEC or through media coverage, including the widely discussed Sold a Story podcast and numerous headlines and articles that we've seen around the literacy crisis. These are just some examples. And as Ed Trust is pointing out here, the U.S. literacy crisis is urgent and it's also very much preventable. As they're pointing out here, literacy is really a critical civil rights issue. Even prior to the pandemic, America's reading scores were consistently dropping, and the populations that were most affected by that troubling trend were students of color, our students living in poverty, our students with disabilities, and our multilingual learners. And we now know that outdated reading instructional methods are really at the heart of that issue. So if you haven't heard the Sold a Story podcast by Emily Hanford, highly recommend you give that a listen. Really, the goal of that podcast is to reveal how ineffective teaching practices have persisted despite evidence from a number of different fields, including cognitive science, that really contradicts them. And that reliance on flawed methods harmed our students' reading skills and wasted a lot of educational resources for many years. So we now know that to effectively address the literacy crisis, we need to adopt practices that are evidence-based and can support all our learners in learning to read. So as you can see here, in 2022, only 33% of fourth graders achieved proficiency in reading, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, sometimes also referred to as NAEP. This statistic highlights a very concerning trend, especially for historically marginalized groups. Black and Latino students, those from low-income families, multilingual learners, and students with disabilities consistently show lower performance levels. And research indicates students who do not learn to read by the end of third grade are likely to continue to struggle as poor readers throughout their entire academic careers. So addressing this literacy crisis is essential for ensuring that all of our students have the opportunity to succeed. And this quote at the bottom by Barack Obama emphasizes the fundamental role of reading in education. So it really highlights that reading isn't just about literacy. It also serves as the foundation for understanding complex topics across all disciplines, including math, science, history, and even civics engagement. This underscores the importance of ensuring that all children have access to effective reading instruction. So Worcester has not been immune to the literacy crisis, unfortunately. Our literacy data reflects both national and statewide trends. In 2023, only 24% of our third grade students met or exceeded grade level expectations on the ELA MCAS test. So at that time, we reviewed our current practices in light of that really troubling data. And the first thing we observed was that as of the 2022-2023 school year, Worcester's teachers did not have access to high quality elementary ELA curricular materials. So you can see the little image on the right of the screen there. That is from EdReports. And in 2021, EdReports, which is a nonprofit that evaluates educational materials, found that our primary ELA curriculum at the time, Fountas and Pinnell Classroom, did not meet expectations for alignment with college and career-ready standards or the science of reading. And some key areas where the curriculum fell short included having a lack of complex texts, limited grammar and vocabulary instruction, and insufficient time dedicated to foundational skills instruction, which includes phonics in kindergarten through second grade. Then we surveyed our teachers here in Worcester, and they also identified big gaps in the curriculum, and particularly when it came to phonics instruction. And we know Worcester wasn't alone in this. F&P Classroom was used in over 40% of elementary schools nationwide at its peak. But at the same time, it was clear that we needed to address this. A shift was really needed to ensure that our students and our teachers had access to the best possible resources for effective reading instruction. So as you can see here, a robust body of research highlights the powerful impact of high-quality instructional materials on student outcomes. So we know from numerous studies that when teachers lack access to high-quality materials, they often resort to finding resources online, and that leads to inconsistencies and therefore inequities in the instructional quality of those materials. And we know that issue is particularly pronounced in urban districts like Worcester. Studies also indicate that students of color and students from low-income background are less likely to have access to standards-aligned, high-quality instructional materials as compared to their peers. So providing teachers with a high-quality curriculum with a clear sequence of instruction has shown to improve classroom practice and elevate instruction the students receive. In fact, classrooms where students had consistent access to grade-appropriate assignments, one study found that students made nearly 2 months of additional learning gains. So given all that information, Worcester knew that we really needed to adopt high quality instructional materials as our next step. So this is the timeline that we followed in deciding on which materials those would be. So in the 2022-2023 school year, we began that process of choosing our high quality instructional materials for ELA. So as we researched new programs, we were simultaneously working to really grow educators' understanding of the research behind our upcoming instructional shift, making sure that folks understood the why behind this change. And then prior to adopting a new curriculum, educators and instructional coaches participated in various professional learning opportunities, and those were aimed at deepening their understanding of the research base. So that included a 42-hour course on the keys to beginning reading, and that was taken by all of our instructional coaches at the elementary level, as well as some teacher leaders from each school that then could take the information back to schools and share it with their colleagues. And then we had a lot of book studies and workshops going on that year as well. And at the same time, we were embarking in this really robust year-long curriculum selection process, really aiming to choose a program that aligned with the science of reading and met the specific needs of our schools and of our students and teachers. So our first step in that process was inviting all elementary staff who would like to participate to review 9 programs that met expectations according to Ed reports. So we laid those all out in our administration building in the auditorium, and for a week it was open to anyone who wanted to come in, take a look at those resources and fill out a survey letting us know what their thoughts were on each of them. So based on those surveys that we collected during that preliminary review, there were 4 top-rated programs that we selected for further consideration. And from there, each school was invited to send 1 to 2 representatives to attend a day of presentations from each of those curriculum providers to get that deeper look at those 4 programs. Ultimately, we chose 2 programs for a 2-month pilot in 6 of our elementary schools. And then we had surveys and interviews with teachers and administrators, letting us know how that was going with each of those programs. We also did classroom observations of the curriculum in action. And ultimately that led us to adopt Amplify CKLA in grades K to 5 and Amplify ELA in grade 6 for district-wide implementation that following school year. And we know no curriculum is perfect, but Amplify clearly emerged as the best choice for our schools for several reasons. So first, it received high ratings from our pilot teachers who had tried it out for those 2 months. It was also designated as green rated by Ed reports, which was previously discussed. And it was also green rated by Curate, which is curriculum ratings by teachers. And that's a curriculum review panel specific to Massachusetts, organized by the Department of Education and made up of Massachusetts educators. We also knew the materials were aligned to both our state curriculum frameworks and what we know to be research-based best practices, which included explicit and systematic foundational skills instruction, which includes phonics. And in addition to that, we really admired that students were encountering rich and rigorous grade level text every single day and units that were clearly designed to build their knowledge on a wide range of topics, which fostered critical thinking and problem solving and really rich discussion in our classrooms. When we looked at the daily learning tasks, we noted that they were providing opportunities for students to really think strategically and extend their thinking. And they also embedded strategies to meet the wide range of learners in our classrooms. So if I'm a classroom teacher looking at a lesson, I can see a little sidebar on the side of my lesson with suggestions for supporting multilingual learners in the lesson and students with disabilities, or any student who might need a little more support with that particular skill or concept. We also really appreciated that there were opportunities for problem solving and a lot of critical thinking. And lastly, there was a really strong research base supporting Amplify with evidence of other districts that were similar to Worcester using this program and seeing improved literacy outcomes. So from here, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Colleen Murray, and she's going to tell you a little bit about some of the research and the frameworks behind this approach in more detail.
Okay, so I am going to, having reviewed the rationale for selecting Amplify as our curriculum, we're now going to examine the research foundations. But you can go to the next slide. Let's take a closer look at the definitions behind the research and major literacy frameworks. Understanding these concepts will clarify different approaches to reading instruction and reveal how each shapes the way we teach literacy skills. The science of reading is an extensive interdisciplinary body of research developed over 5 decades and based on thousands of global studies. It provides strong evidence about how proficient reading and writing develop and identifies the most effective instructional methods. This body of research draws insight from cognitive psychology, neuroscience, linguists, and education, forming a comprehensive understanding of how people learn to read. Structured literacy is an explicit, systematic, sequential approach to reading instruction. It focuses on essential components such as phonology, sound symbol association, syllable structure, morphology, syntax, and semantics, designed to support all students, particularly those with reading difficulties. Structured literacy teaches the structure of language in a clear, cumulative manner, building towards skills, reading comprehension, and fluency. Balanced literacy is an instructional framework that combines various reading and writing approaches, integrating elements of both whole language and phonics. It emphasizes shared guided and independent reading along with writing activities. While it aims to foster a love of reading and accommodate diverse learning needs, its flexible nature and lack of standardized implementation can lead to inconsistent outcomes, especially for students with learning challenges. As we explore these definitions, it's important to understand how the science of reading forms the foundation of our approach to literacy education. This research isn't just a single method, it's a rich body of knowledge that shows us how reading skills develop over time. It tells us what works best in teaching kids to read. What's compelling about the science of reading is that it directly supports structured literacy. This framework takes those research findings and puts them into practice in the classroom, making sure all students get the support they need to learn to read. And that's where the Amplify curriculum comes in. It's designed with these principles in mind, using research-based strategies to help every student become a confident and skilled reader. I can have you go. Thank you. Now we're going to compare 2 approaches to literacy instruction: balanced literacy and structured literacy. While both aim to develop strong, confident readers, they take very different paths to reach this goal. As we look at these 2 methods side by side, we'll see how structured literacy aligns closely with the latest research on effective reading instruction, while balanced literacy reflects a more flexible, student-driven approach. Understanding these differences is key to recognizing why many educators and researchers now advocate for a shift toward structured literacy. In a balanced literacy classroom, the K-3 literacy block consists of separate blocks of read aloud, guided reading, shared reading, independent reading, and word work activities. Phonics lessons are chosen based on observed needs and likely differ in sequence from classroom to classroom. Meaning and visual and semantic cues are used by beginning readers to solve words. Comprehension skills are modeled and practiced using a variety of disconnected text. A significant portion of the K-3 literacy block is spent in small groups, with some students engaged in guided reading of level text with the teacher, while other students work independently. Conversely, the literacy block in a structured literacy setting integrates all aspects of literacy. It provides an explicit, systematic scope and sequence of instruction and foundational skills, including phonics, to every child. Complex text is at the center of instruction, with comprehension skills taught in the context of connected text sets. More time is spent in whole group instruction. Small groups are flexible, needs-based, and used to target foundational skills or guided comprehension of complex text. Thank you. Now we'll look at the simple view of reading. Now we're going to explore the differences between balanced literacy and structured literacy. It's essential to understand a foundational concept in reading instruction. The simple view of reading. This model illustrates that reading comprehension is the product of two key components, word recognition and language comprehension. By breaking down these elements, we can gain a clearer understanding of how they work together to develop proficient readers. The simple view of reading specifically identifies word recognition and language comprehension as the two essential components of reading comprehension. Word recognition involves the ability to recognize words by translating letters into sounds, while language comprehension encompasses understanding of spoken language, which includes vocabulary, grammar, and the ability to infer meaning from text. For effective reading comprehension, both components must be developed. If either area is weak, the overall comprehension may decline. This framework emphasizes the necessity of targeted instruction in both word recognition and language comprehension to cultivate proficient readers. Amplify closely aligns with this model by systematically integrating instruction in both areas throughout its curriculum, ensuring that the students develop the skills they need to become successful readers. Now we're going to look at Scarborough's reading rope. Building our understanding of the simple view of reading, we will now look at the rope, which offers a more detailed model illustrating the essential components of proficient reading. This model consists of two main strands, word recognition and language comprehension. Word recognition includes key skills such as phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. These skills enable readers to identify and articulate words effectively. On the other hand, language comprehension encompasses background knowledge, vocabulary, understanding language structure, and verbal reasoning. Together, these elements help readers make sense of what they read. As these strands intertwine in Scarborough's model, they emphasize that effective reading requires both the ability to recognize words and the capacity to comprehend their meaning and context. This framework highlights the critical importance of teaching both aspects to ensure that learners develop the necessary skills for successful reading. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Kate Aselton.
Thanks, Colleen. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the format of the Amplify CKLA and ELA program. CKLA is our program that we use in kindergarten through grade 5, and ELA is the title of the program used in 6th grade. Informed by the science of reading, the Amplify programs use research-based practices to develop confident, proficient readers prepared for future academic challenges. These programs foster a love for reading by connecting literacy instruction with rich content, ensuring students not only learn to read, but also understand and engage with what they read. As students progress through grade levels, the literacy block adapts to meet their growing needs. In the next section, we'll explore what a literacy block looks like across different grade levels. Amplify CKLA K-2. Amplify's Core Knowledge Language Arts CKLA program for grades K through 2 provides a strong foundation in literacy through a structured, knowledge-rich approach. CKLA lessons are divided into 2 strands, skills and knowledge, aligning with the simple view of reading and the reading rope models discussed earlier. This image captures the CKLA's skills block in action in a 2nd grade classroom, where students are applying their phonics skills through partner reading of a decodable text. And here we have a quote from a grade 2 teacher at Vernon Hill School. "I see a big difference in the ability of the students' comprehension of the material and ability to answer questions. This is also the first year that I have had so many students come to me reading on grade level." Amplify CKLA in grades 3 through 6. In grades, 3 through 5. In grades 3 through 5, the skills and knowledge blocks from the primary grades evolve into an integrated literacy block. Knowledge-rich units focus deeply on a single topic over several weeks, seamlessly moving among different literacy activities that engage students in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Students analyze increasingly complex narrative and informational texts through meaningful discussions, collaborative activities, close reading exercises, and writing tasks. The curriculum also includes explicit instruction in advanced grammar, spelling patterns, and vocabulary to support students' growing comprehension and language skills. And here we see an image of some third grade students engaged in a CKLA lesson at Belmont Street School. And we have another quote from Vernon Hill from a third grade teacher. I would definitely say that I am much more confident in myself as a teacher going through these lessons. Student-wise, I do see much more confidence this year as compared to last. This group of students seems better prepared and much more confident in themselves in reading. Amplify ELA, grade 6. In 6th grade, students transition to Amplify ELA. This curriculum taps into students' natural tendencies towards collaboration, exploration, and independence using engaging texts, collaborative activities, and student-led inquiry as core elements of the literacy block. Here are some students at Midland Street School working together to record key ideas from a reading on a poster while working in the Mysteries and Investigations unit. And a quote from a teacher at Belmont who teaches 6th grade, I think our new curriculum has challenged students in a way we didn't think possible before. They are being held to a high standard and they are rising to that occasion. And Amanda's going to come back to explain a little bit about the building knowledge.
Okay, thank you so much, Kate and Colleen. So here, this slide illustrates the Amplify CKLA unit topics that your students are going to encounter throughout the year, and it's organized by grade level. So as you can see, students have the opportunity to build their knowledge and their vocabulary across a diverse array of nonfiction topics, and they're also gaining exposure to both contemporary literature and classic literature. One piece that's really important is that the students are developing their knowledge over time through interconnected strands that progress and build upon another year after year. So if you look at these yellow boxes here, I've just added that to bring your attention to one example of one of those strands. So if we look at preschool, and looking at that All About Me unit, our preschool students there are learning to identify the parts of the body and name them. And that really lays the groundwork for what's happening in kindergarten when they do a unit on the 5 senses. Then that foundational knowledge just keeps on expanding as they go through grades 1 through 3, where they hit the 1st grade unit, the human body. Then in 2nd grade, they're doing the human body, building blocks of nutrition, going a little deeper. And then 3rd grade, the human body, systems and senses. So as you can imagine, as kids are engaged in those units year after year, they're coming to the classroom with more and more rich background knowledge, rich vocabulary, and really excitement to build upon what they already know. And we know that there have been numerous studies that have really demonstrated to us that this sort of knowledge building is really, really crucial to developing strong reading comprehension skills. So readers who possess relevant background knowledge about a topic are much better equipped to understand and to integrate new information they're encountering in new texts into that existing knowledge base. So here we have some of our kindergarten students at Elm Park, and they are acting out the Little Miss Muffet nursery rhyme as a way to really reinforce that challenging vocabulary within that text, and obviously having a lot of fun doing it as well. And then we have a quote from one of our principals, Luke Roberts at Maestri, and he said, through CKLA, each unit connects elements of skill and knowledge which allows students to more effectively grasp the context of the subject matter and apply it to their learning. The lessons are comprehensive, well-organized, and rigorous. Amplify's programs also include targeted supports for multilingual learners, which are sometimes referred to as MLs. And that was a program feature that we really highly valued during our adoption process. So these are some key components that benefit our ML students. We know there is really language-rich discussion happening every single day by a lot of interactive discussion in small groups and pairs and as a whole class. It really helps students to develop and strengthen their speaking and listening skills when they engage in that discussion regularly. Additionally, the vocabulary instruction in the program is systematic, introducing and practicing new words in context, so we really build understanding. There are visual support, such as graphic organizers and illustrations that can further aid comprehension and clarify those connections between concepts as well. As I mentioned earlier, our teachers are also well equipped with a range of supports and strategies to scaffold instruction for ML students. And these strategies are embedded right in that teacher's guide, and they're designed to break down complex texts and tasks and increase the number of access points and the accessibility for all of our students. And the program also promotes differentiated instruction through flexible groupings. So it's ensuring that kids are getting the targeted support they need, depending on their English proficiency level. We also have a program that goes along with CKLA that's used by our ESL teacher, and that's called Amplify CKLA's Language Studio. So that provides program-aligned ESL resources that either preview or reinforce the language and content from the core CKLA lessons. So for the first time, we're really seeing full alignment from what's happening in the ESL classroom to what's happening in the general education classroom. So that's really helping to reinforce the vocabulary and concepts in two different locations. And that also helps our MLs to access that grade level content at the same time that they're developing their English and effective expression. Additionally, the lessons and units are featuring culturally relevant content that really resonates with students from diverse backgrounds like we have in Worcester. It enhances engagement and relatability. And CKLA introduces students to that broad range of knowledge-rich texts and topics, and we're really exploring themes that are shaping civilizations and cultures worldwide. So altogether, all of those elements are creating a very inclusive learning environment where we hope our multilingual learners will just continue to thrive. And our district also has a Department of Multilingual Education, and they have coaches within that department that offer further professional learning and support to our teachers just to help them implement all of those pieces as best we can to support all of our students. So to end this section, I just wanted to also share that in considering the adoption of the Amplify programs, we carefully reviewed the experiences of other districts that had demographics that were similar to Worcester that had already implemented Amplify. So that included examining recent research and also consulting with district leaders from several districts, all of whom reported significant improvements in student literacy after adopting Amplify. So those districts included Denver Public Schools, as you see here, the Harris County Department of Education in Texas, the Cleveland Metropolitan School District in Ohio, Baltimore City Public Schools in Maryland, and Los Angeles Unified School District in California, among others. Although providing high-quality instructional materials is an essential first step in ensuring that all of our students are receiving the best instruction possible, we know that teacher knowledge is also really paramount to the success of any implementation. So in this next section, we'll outline professional learning opportunities and supports that are available to our educators through the curriculum adoption process and now into our implementation. So our adoption of the Amplify programs was supported by a comprehensive series of professional learning opportunities. We had full day Amplify, what they called launch sessions for all of our educators and our administrators in May of 2023 before our first year of implementation. And then following that, we had educators, administrators, and instructional coaches participate in several additional trainings that were led by Amplify experts throughout that first year, the 2023-2024 school year. So these trainings covered a range of topics, but they included a session on enhancing planning for our classroom teachers. And for our school leaders, they had a session the same day on enhancing observation. Our elementary instructional coaches began attending monthly literacy meetings starting the 2023-2024 school year as well. And we really worked together to support the program implementation and deepen their understanding of the science of reading. And then this year, we had such positive feedback on that we introduced bi-monthly literacy leadership teams. And that now includes still the instructional coach. We've also added school principals are coming, and they're bringing a teacher leader from their building as well. So that's really allowing us to continue to grow the capacity of our coaches, but also to spread that knowledge throughout the school by allowing some other people in the school to be experts as well. And this year we've continued to expand our learning, having representatives of our teaching staff, our coaching staff, and our school leadership team participating in a statewide Amplify Community of Practice network. And we were also chosen as one of 12 districts in the country to participate in Amplify's Innovator Network, where we have meetings with other districts who are also engaging in innovative practices with this program, just to continue to foster professional learning and program innovation and make sure we're continuing to meet the needs of our students. This work is definitely a collective effort. It's not limited to the teaching and learning department or the three of us here today alone. We continue to collaborate very closely with the multilingual education department and Office of Equity, Cultivation, and Recruitment to ensure that our ELA instruction is culturally responsive and is always meeting the needs of our diverse learners as best we can. So along with those district-wide supports shared on the previous slide, the teaching and learning staff also provide continuous and often personalized support to schools throughout the first year of implementation and now beyond. So these include regular learning walks to support school leadership teams, identifying what to look for in terms of strong program implementation and research-aligned best practices, lesson and unit planning support for teachers, supporting schools with protocols for data analysis and standards-focused planning. In our first year of implementation, teacher teams also developed district pacing guides to facilitate teacher planning. And those pacing guides have since evolved into detailed curriculum maps that outline various components, including the standards that are assessed in each unit, summaries of the formative and summative assessments, scaffold supports and extensions for each unit. And it's a really comprehensive approach that ensures that all of our teachers have the tools they need to reach their learners. So as the kindergarten teacher quoted here noted, learning to implement a new curriculum program with confidence absolutely takes time. As a district staff, we're really committed to supporting educators and continuing to deepen that understanding of the science of reading and continuing to implement effective instructional strategies to help our students succeed. And we consider the Amplify materials to now be a valuable tool in that. Here we have some second graders at Hurd Street, and they are making masks to act out the fable, the wolf in sheep's clothing. And we have another quote from a second grade teacher, and she said, "This year feels much more natural and smooth, which makes it easier to hold the students' interest. The time spent last year adding scaffolds into both sets of slides has also helped to make the lessons more effective." So as you can see, our practice in year 2 just continues to grow and strengthen. All right, so to end the presentation today, we'd love to give you just a further peek into what's actually happening in our literacy block in our schools and our classrooms, in the hopes that it will kind of bring that curriculum to life for all of you. So please enjoy the following very brief video. We had a little sound issue earlier, but it's just background music, so I think we'll be okay. All right, and with that, I will pass it back to Jennifer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. We have some questions in the chat, so why don't we take those first? There's a question from Andrea Peak about the benefit for dyslexic students. Could you talk about students with reading challenges and other disabilities and how the curriculum works for them?
Sure. So one thing that we know about students with dyslexia is that it's very important that they receive systematic and explicit phonics instruction. So that is something that all of our students are now getting through this curriculum. And then if a student has a diagnosis of something like dyslexia, they're also going to be receiving additional support from a special educator. So that might look like time out of the classroom, certain days of the week where they would get even more explicit instruction, reinforcing the concepts that they might need more help with.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to add on to that as well, that we have DIBELS testing, that is a screener, and we do that 3 times a year. And starting in the kindergarten, and if students fall at a certain level on the DIBELS, a letter is going home to the parents to keep them in the loop of how their students are doing within the DIBELS. So we have close contact with parents, and then the letter is where they can come in and speak with the principal, and then we'll go forward from there. I think in kinder, it goes home in the mid-year, but in first grade, it goes home in the beginning of the year, and then all the grades following.
So am I hearing correctly, Colleen, that if parents don't receive that letter because of a DIBELS performance, they should assume that their child is performing as should be?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. We also have a question from Amy West. Is Amplify being used in the dual language programs for English reading instruction? You mentioned a specific element of the CKLA curriculum that was being used. Could you talk about that a little more?
Sure. So the Amplify programs are not used in our dual language programs. They use a program called ARC. The program Language Studio that was mentioned earlier, that would be for our sheltered English immersion classrooms.
Okay. Okay, and the ARC program, is that how would you describe that program? Science of reading, balanced literacy, structured?
They do consider themselves to be a science of reading or a structured literacy program. I don't know much about it, so I don't want to speak too much on it, as that's something that a program that is overseen by our multilingual education department.
Okay, thank you. And we were going to have Caleb here this evening, as everyone knows. And he was going to talk about how the work the district is doing to assure that there is breadth and diversity in the curriculum. That, I understand, has been one of the criticisms of CKLA, that it is takes a relatively narrow historical and cultural approach. Could you talk about how teachers are supplementing CKLA with material that they come up with? And if you are familiar with, I understand Caleb is using a tool, a curriculum bias tool. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I can share a bit about it. I don't know a lot about the curriculum bias tool. That's something that's very new. I know Caleb is working with one elementary, one middle, and one high school to pilot that tool, and that just began, I believe, in January. So there aren't really results out yet. But I can share a little bit about the first part of your question. So when we first adopted this curriculum, we kind of hit this place where any knowledge-based curriculum we're looking at, the question kind of comes up of, whose knowledge and who's deciding which topics we consider to be of value that we're building on year over year. So we met with the Denver Public Schools, who had kind of faced that question head on in their adoption. They were a few years ahead of us in adopting Amplify. And we really talked in depth with them about a few units that their teachers and their staff had pointed out they thought were a little bit problematic because they were only allowing kind of a view of one side of history or oversimplifying historical concepts in younger grade levels. So we had teacher teams really dig into all the units, but then look with a really careful lens at those few units that Denver had already decided that they were pulling out of their curriculum. And we did decide that we were going to have to cut out a unit or two in most grade levels just because there were more lessons there than we have days in a school year. And so when we decided on which lessons and which units to cut, we did end up pulling those that we felt would be better served by being taught in social studies. And we did ensure that those topics do come up in our social studies curriculum. But we felt that something like Columbus, for example, was something that should be discussed in third grade social studies, which is where it falls in our social studies framework, so that it could be discussed looking at multiple facets of and experiences with Columbus's arrival. Rather than in kindergarten, which is where our CKLA had it, where we know students aren't quite able to look at it through the same lens, through the same depth. So we did not include that unit. There were a few others where we made some changes. And then in our curriculum maps, we've also added notes for teachers that teacher teams have helped to come up with around where we might want to add a diverse viewpoint, for example, or language you might use to discuss an issue that might be historically charged. And that's work that we continue forward with. So I'm really looking forward to Caleb's team using that equity tool to look at units and give us suggestions for places where we need to do a little more work, add a few more supplements and pieces like that. But I think in terms of diversity of characters, we don't really see, or authors, we don't so much see an issue with that. I think it's more the historical events and how those are predicted in the different readers students are looking at, where we have to make sure we're continually coming back and checking in on those.
Okay, great, thank you. And Naj asks a question about the dual language programs and how why a different curriculum is being used in those.
I can't speak to that. I know that dual language programs adopted ARC several years ago, and each of our curriculum adoptions will have a contract for a certain length of time. But I am not sure if there's plans to continue with ARC when this contract ends or to look at other programs. We'd have to ask the multilingual education department on that.
Okay, thank you. And for any one of you, either Kate, Colleen, or Amanda, it sounds like the curriculum has been very well received by the teachers and the other school staff. Could you talk about what it is that they like about it and share with us any particular stories that you've heard?
Kate or Colleen, I feel like I've been speaking too much, so I'll pass it to either of you if you'd like to share.
Sure. I think the teachers really enjoy having the format of the lessons planned out really intricately for them. There's an intense amount of planning that goes into elementary school curriculum. Being like an expert in your field, you're teaching multiple content areas. So I think that careful planning is what the teachers really appreciate. And year one, they were a little bit building the plane and flying the plane at the same time. They were getting used to the format of the lessons. They were getting used to the content of the lessons. And so last year was a year that they had to really take it kind of day by day in the beginning. And they took notes. A lot of teachers kept journals. They make notes about what went well, what didn't go well. And then this year, I saw a huge difference in teachers. They were confident. They They really felt like they understood the content and the format of the lessons, and they were able to make a lot of changes to it based on their experience the previous year. And I think they all feel like last year was a learning year, and this year they're really implementing it well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, can I just add one thing to that as well?
Go on, Colleen.
So thinking back to the presentation that we just gave and the teachers really building their own knowledge on the difference between the balanced literacy and the structured literacy. And I think that everybody has, it's very positive. We have, every time we're in a school, it's extreme positive talk. But I think that us as a district continuing to build the teacher knowledge on why we adopted this and making the shifts, because we do have a lot of teachers that have been teaching for 30 years, or 20, 30 years. And they're like, well, I was finding success in my room and I want to go back to the old ways, or I think that this way. So we just have to make certain that we keep on sending the message of what is the difference, because the biggest difference would be like the leveled readers versus the grade level text. And the teachers do get some concerned for the kiddos that are not able to access but the materials, but building in those scaffolds. So I feel as a district, that's where, we're accepting of this new curriculum, but we need to make certain that we just continue with the professional development so they really have a true understanding of why the shifts were made.
Thank you. Okay. And from the students' perspective, what have you heard from the kids about what they think about the curriculum?
I can start that one, but I'm sure Kate and Colleen will want to add on as well. I love going into classrooms during this curriculum because our kids are so excited to share all the new things they know. I think it's exciting for anyone, right, to be knowledgeable of a topic and be able to speak to it and share facts and interesting information that even as adults, sometimes I don't know about as much about the topic as, a first grader who's so excited to tell me about ancient Mesopotamia and everything they've learned. So there's just a lot of joy in that. And I think that's really lovely to see.
Kate or Colleen?
I would just add that after each unit, the teachers do a project and it sums up everything that they had learned, and they get super excited. Like first grade, they do the human body and the kids are all dressed up and they're using the vocabulary that they learned, and they're like playing doctor with a doll and whatnot. But you can really see the joy, but you can also see the knowledge that they have gained, and they're using the language. So it's amazing.
Thank you. One of the areas that we as educators have struggled with over the years is writing and teaching writing. And it's something that, as you look forward in what is a strength that kids either bring to further study or to the workplace, writing is one of the areas that has traditionally been a source of concern. How does the curriculum address the ongoing development of writing skills?
Sure, I can start us out in speaking to that. So one thing that's very noticeable about this program is rather than having a separate reading block and then a writing block, students are really writing daily in response to what they're reading. So it may look a little different. We're not all week always working on, let's say, a 5-paragraph essay during our writing block in 5th grade. A lot of the writing is kind of shorter response to text, where they're responding in a sentence level or a paragraph level, and we're really working to strengthen that shorter format of writing before we then, at maybe the end of a unit, we do transfer over, and then we're starting to work on like lengthier essays and things like that. I really appreciate that we're responding to text in our writing, because it's very noticeable that it's just allowing for more equitable opportunities for all of our students, because we're asking kids to write about topics that everyone in the class has just read about, everyone in the class has knowledge of, that we've explicitly taught some key vocabulary around. So kids are all coming at writing assignments with some shared understanding that they're able to put into their writing, rather than something like prompts we used to give long ago. I know when I first started teaching of, write about your summer vacation, right? And then we would have a varied number of experiences for summer vacation. Some kids would have family vacations to the beach to write about, and others would be writing about times when they may have spent more time indoors. They may have been responsible for caring for siblings and not feel like they were able to write as richly maybe about that. So we really appreciate that everyone's able to pull from background knowledge that we've built together as a class, and it really creates that community and excitement about writing. We do notice that that continues to be a place where we need to have more growth from our students and have maybe a little more support for our instruction. So a next step for us going into next year and thinking ahead is really working on creating a more consistent sort of bank of writing supports and strategies that our teachers can use, especially for students who need a little more support with writing. Right now, they definitely are using support and strategies, but sometimes that will differ from classroom to classroom or school to school. And we know for a lot of our kids, they might start the year in one school and then by the end of the year be in another school. And we want to make sure that we have that consistency so they can jump right in and know the graphic organizer that they're going to see in writing, or the supports their teacher is expecting them to use when they go to approach a prompt.
Great, thank you. And then one final question, and that is the Amplify CKLA curriculum is for kids in grades K through 5. How does this, the skills and approach that the students and teachers are using, how do you make that connection to the middle and high school literacy curriculum?
Sure. So our middle and high schools are using different programs than our elementary schools. But one thing that's nice is that the Massachusetts framework standards for ELA are very much recursive. So they're really building upon the same skills year after year as the kids go from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. And we're just expecting more depth and complexity as they move up the grade levels. So we know that as more of our students are leaving grade 6, reading and writing on grade level, which we're starting to move towards now, we know they're going to be better prepared for any curriculum they're encountering in middle school, whether that be an ELA curriculum or any top subject area, really, because we know reading and writing is so key to success across the content areas. And then I'm also in communication with our secondary focused curriculum specialist, Kate Aselton. So she is making the curriculum maps for those middle and high school classrooms. So one thing that we're making sure we're checking in on is the novels that are being taught at the different grade levels to make sure, we're not reading the same novel in 5th grade and repeating it in 7th grade. So as we're doing that work, we've actually come across some really nice connections that weren't necessarily intentional, but are definitely very happy accidents that we feel like are really exciting and setting our kids up for success. So to give you an example of that, our 4th graders just finished a contemporary fiction unit. And within that, they're reading excerpts from a book called The House on Mango Street, which many people are probably familiar with. In CKLA, and then in 7th grade, they're going to read the full novel. So we're excited for those 4th graders to get up to 7th grade and hope that they'll have remembered having read those stories in 4th grade and just go to that middle school experience, excited to read the full text, remembering things from their 4th grade experience.
Okay, great, thank you. As we wrap up, any other questions? You can either put them in the chat or just raise your hand.
I see, Jen, that Amy had a question about how does Worcester Public Schools see school librarians supporting with literacy development? And then I was also curious to kind of take it outside the school setting and think about where they see roles of community-based organizations. We're joined tonight by many youth development organizations. And so, kind of what's the role of maybe in-school librarians and then the Worcester Public Library and other youth development organizations in supporting literacy.
Great. Amanda, do you want to start?
Sure. So to the first point, looking at Amy's question here, we don't actually have school librarians at the elementary level, so there's not a direct connection there, but we do have some Worcester Public Library branches within some of our schools, and then we also have schools visited by Libby, the library bus that comes around, which our students love. So one piece that I know some teachers have reached out to for support from libraries with is CKLA has for each unit a list of suggested supplemental picture books that would just add more depth to the learning kids are doing within the curriculum. So I know teachers will sometimes reach out to the librarians in their library branch connected to their school or the Libby bus to borrow some additional books so they can do some additional reading and knowledge building, or to have a basket out in the classroom of books aligned to the topic that kids can go to and read and learn more when they're finishing early. So we have some really nice partnerships there. And then the Worcester Public Library has also been wonderful in supporting summer reading for us. This year, I am not an expert on this by any means because it goes into that secondary realm, but our middle and high school students were all able to read a shared book over the summer, and the library was wonderful in allowing them access to an online program called Sora that allowed kids to access ebooks, as well as thoroughly stocking all their branches with copies of those texts so that everyone had equal access.
Great. And could any one of you, either one of you, talk a little bit about the community and how the community might be thinking about supporting the schools and kids and families with reading?
I could talk about that in the sense of like things that I know that have happened, like the Woo Socks or even Tenacity, like the summer programs, and they push out come join our programs or just a reading program, and then they do like little incentives to get the students to read or keep a log and then pass it in, and they give them, you know, access to going to a game or something when they go to, if they join the Tenacity tennis program. So I always found that those, when I was in the classroom or just in the school buildings, that the students got super excited for any sort of reading initiative that was pushed out through the community.
Okay, great, thank you. We just have a minute or two. Any final questions? No. Emily, do you want to tell us a little bit about what else is coming up in terms of our programs?
Sure. So we don't have definitive dates yet, but we will be hosting our annual budget community forum in the coming weeks to provide a venue for folks to learn more about the proposed school budget for the upcoming year and ask questions. So stay tuned for more information there. For the many roundtable folks joining us this evening, we will be digging deeper into those survey results. If you can believe it, I was only scratching the surface there at the beginning. So we will bring in Hanover Research to be sharing more about that at an upcoming roundtable meeting. Anyone else who is interested would be welcome to join. And then just on a note about today's presentation, it was recorded and we will send out all of the slides and materials that were discussed. And please feel free to follow up with me if you have any additional questions.
Hey, thank you, Emily. And Amanda, Colleen, and Kate, thank you so much. This has been a great event, lots of good information, plenty of stuff for us all to think about, and we will see you at our next event. Thank you all.